as we grow and develop, it's like when we're learning to ride a bike, first we just like fall over to one side and then we fall over to the other. But even experienced bike riders are making micro adjustments. It's always balancing. It's not that they become balanced completely. And so, yeah, there's this grace to how we experience these different aspects as we kind of become more accustomed to them. And I think that's true in relationship with other people as much as it is in relationship to how we experience these things within us.
Hi, my name's Michael, and welcome to Today Dreamer, a podcast and YouTube channel that examines the interplay between inner work and outer work. Through conscious conversations and practical walkthroughs, we'll be exploring ideas and practices to help you find a deeper sense of clarity, develop your focus, and take meaningful action. I hope you love the show. Welcome to another episode of the Today Dreamer podcast. Today I've got Sebene Selassie on, and I'm super excited to share this episode with you because we had a very engaging, very interesting conversation around belonging. And I feel as though because of the way the system is today, belonging is something that we often are deprived of, the feeling of belonging. But each and every one of us are connected in ways that we don't completely understand, and belonging is our natural birthright. We all belong. We are all part of this interconnected system, and we are all connected with one another in the world. And Sebene really, reminds us of that. Sebene is a self-confessed dharma nerd. She is a meditation teacher, a writer, coach, and consultant. She's studied race and culture pretty in depth, and she's been practicing meditation for 25 plus years. She's also been working with youth and families for social justice programs for over 20 years and is the former executive director of the New York Insight Meditation Center. Sebene is passionate about, making Dharma more accessible and relevant to the modern world. And she's a regular guest on the 10% Happier podcast and show with Dan Harris. And she's just a very beautiful being. And you're going to sense some of that energy in the conversation today. So just wanted to share my gratitude before we get into things. I really do appreciate you being here with me through this exploration of, different practices to bring us back to this feeling or this state of stillness, and exploring the lives and minds of these very interesting individuals. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting chat on belonging, and I don't really know what else to say. Let's just get into it. If you are enjoying the episodes, if you are resonating with what I'm putting out, please support the show. You can do that by simply contacting me and letting me know what you think about things. Or you could subscribe, or you could tell a friend about it. Any of those things would show your support in an immense way. So thanks again for, tuning in, and let's get into the chat with Sebene.
Can I ask you one question before we start?
Go for it.
Are you recording the audio separately, like two different audio tracks, or just because if there are major sirens or who knows what can happen in Brooklyn, if I should mute myself so that you don't get kind of overtaken by noise?
You know what? I actually kind of like that extra stuff. I feel as though, I heard an album recently, and it was I think it was like a Ram Dass mixed in with like some of his quotes mixed in with some, I don't know, kind of like electronic kind of down tempo music, and then put onto a vinyl. And the guy intentionally left kind of all the creaks in the chair and all these little bits and pieces in there because it felt more real. So I've kind of taken that onto the podcast, and I like that kind of a thing. So if that happens, I think it's just an extra element that I think will bring, everyone else out there into the experience a bit more. So let's not worry about it.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So where do we begin with this? Well, I think what I was thinking about when I was kind of looking forward to this conversation was, I don't usually start by talking about someone's book. Usually we just kind of talk about things and then the book comes into it. But
Yeah, no problem.
I feel as though your book, I kind of want to start on the book because it's such a it's kind of what really grabbed my attention initially, and I've just been kind of thinking about this idea of belonging ever since. And I even meditated on it yesterday, and I've had some kind of really, I don't know, kind of beyond words realizations about this idea of just belonging. And this, it's more of just a feeling or a knowing or something inside that um, home comes to mind, something that makes me feel at home here where I
Mm,
am.
mm.
Could you tell me a little bit about the book and why you wrote it? And I'll throw like an introduction and everything in afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I wrote about belonging, I think because I've been seeking belonging my entire life. And, I wanted to write about it because I feel that it's something that many of us don't feel. Starting pretty young, we feel a sense of just not fitting in or outsiderness or really uncomfortable in our skin or our families or our communities. And it just seemed like a theme and really a word that is a synonym for what many of us are seeking on a spiritual path or through self-development or self-growth, is like a sense of connection and um, freedom and really feeling like we can be at full ease wherever we go. And someone actually, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I heard someone, I can't remember who it was, the teacher say that the definition of awakening is the capacity to be completely who you are wherever you go. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh, wow, like I was probably in my 30s at the time, and I had that sense, but only in certain places. I only felt that full sense of belonging and ease in particular situations with particular people. And I
What
think
kind
before
of
that,
what kind of situations? Just to, I'm
I think
curious.
then probably with, my oldest friends, my kind of deepest communities, um, in particular spiritual experiences. So on retreat, when I was, really settled, and even if I was struggling, there was this sense of ease within the pain or the struggle. Uh, but I think earlier in my life, what got me seeking is that I felt that almost nowhere. Maybe if I was out with friends and reached a specific state, maybe, you know, induced by substances or not, but like in joy and laughter, dancing, or I might have felt that sense of belonging in very particular situations. But most of the time, I moved around the world like with this sense of unease. And so as I've grown in my own practice, I feel that sense of belonging more and more and more. And that to me is a sign of my growth and my awakening.
So was that a conscious kind of decision? Was it a conscious recognition of kind of that part of you that was
Oh,
seemingly missing?
hmm. Oh, I think I lost you for a moment.
Am I back?
Yes. You said, was that a conscious kind of decision? That's all I heard.
Yeah. So was that like a conscious decision, to recognize that that part of you was seemingly missing, and that's what you were after, or I mean, like, was that the catalyst for your journey in a way?
Yeah, I think the catalyst for my journey was suffering. And, in Buddhism, it's said that to be on the path, you have to have little dust in your eyes. So you still have dust in your eyes, like you don't see clearly, but there's some wisdom that even gets you to the path. Because otherwise I'd still be, wandering, trying to ease my suffering or pain through things that don't usually help um, in the long run with that. So yes, that unease led me there, but I don't know if that was conscious.
Hmm.
It was more like a internal homing device that got me there.
Hmm. And could you talk to me a little bit about kind of, I guess, just the recognition of this homing device, and then going from that point to deciding I need to write this book.
Oh, it's a long journey. So yeah, that initial homing device, and like a lot of people, I think early on who are seekers, not necessarily surrounded by seekers, I was just sort of on my own, seeking out workshops, trying to find a therapist, going on my first retreats, and my friends thought it was pretty weird. And I have to say, this was 25 some years ago, so this is not the era of mindfulness on podcasts and mindfulness studios. Like you had to sort of be on the fringes to find meditation and yoga, and it was starting to become more popular, but it wasn't sort of at the level it is now. So that was what drew me then. In terms of writing the book, I made the decision to write the book and started writing it when I was already a deep practitioner and already started teaching meditation and teaching in Buddhist contexts. So it felt like a natural fit for me. I've always enjoyed communicating and writing. That doesn't mean that I thought I could write a book, but actually someone asked me if I would be interested in writing a book. And so that's sort of what drew me to this. And the topic came pretty easily. I thought for a moment I should write about cancer because I've been through it 3 times, and it's such a powerful part of my experience. But I realized I really didn't want to write a book about cancer because cancer sucks. And I didn't want to, spend 200 pages talking about kind of a miserable experience, even if in the end, I learned a lot from it.
Wow, I feel like I want to go a bit deeper. I'm sure if you didn't want to write about it, you're probably not too inclined to talk about it. But if you're open, I'd like to hear.
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine talking about it. I just didn't want to spend a whole book on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I feel as though just hmm, thinking about going through an experience like that, and then looking at uh, uh, Buddhism as well. It seems like there may be some point where you're kind of faced with your own death or the possibility of it, and that seems like it would be a pretty intense experience. It's been something I've been kind of, I guess, dipping my toe in the water with recently, and that's the idea of dying, because it's a scary thought initially, and it's just it's something that I haven't really found myself thinking about before. And I don't mean in a suicidal way. I mean as in, we're all going to die one day, and what does that mean to us?
Yeah. It's interesting that there's so many contemplations and practices that are part of the traditional mindfulness teachings, like the classical teachings, but we have kind of glommed on to specific ones of them. I think because of our modern tendencies and our inclinations. So there are some practices that are right there for us to use, like right there in mindfulness, the body is contemplation of death. And that is a teaching that is considered really, really important actually for our spiritual development. I had not done it in my own practice until I actually started to have to face my own death. So it is a powerful practice, and I encourage people to work with it to the extent that is comfortable for them. And I think the younger that we do it, the better it is. I unfortunately was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 34, and in in a strange way, my hardest experiences medically were in that first diagnosis, even though my next two were more severe as diagnoses. I had more hospitalizations and surgeries, and really had close to death experiences in terms of I had kidney failure. I was in the hospital for a while, became really, really thin. And there were times when they didn't really know what was going on with me or what they could do to help me. And yeah, so having that in my mid 30s when my friends are getting married and having kids and starting new careers, it was pretty frightening. And I just learned so much about my own capacity for uh, continuing to grow and find joy and freedom, but also the freedom and joy that can be found in recognizing that our time here is so short, no matter how long we live.
Mm. Mm. Could you talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the ways that your practice held you through that experience? Because it seems like not only it evolved throughout it, and there was some lessons kind of ricocheting back and forth off the experiential element, but you know it sounds like it kind of came at a certain point. You'd been practicing already for a while. So would you be able to tell me a little bit about you know I don't know, like how that went about, and that the interplay between all the things that you'd been practicing, and what were your experience in this kind of turbulent moment?
Yeah. I sometimes wonder how people manage crises without a practice, because even with a practice at that point, almost, I'd been practicing for about 10 years. I was also doing a lot of yoga and been practicing yoga for a long time. And it was still a horror show. I was in shock and in denial and, really grasping at ideas and cures and really confused. And at the same time, I had um, a, a way and a method and a place to return to kind of recenter myself, to ground myself, to get some perspective. I had done retreats, silent retreats before that, but I started doing many more, and that was also a way and a place and a method to really come back to a center that wasn't completely swept up by the storm of what it means to deal with cancer. So, in a practical sense, it was probably at that point where I really turned to practicing with the body in a different way. I think my practice was pretty like head centered before that. I literally was doing a lot of breath meditation at the nostrils, which can be very centering and concentrating. But there was a way in which my meditation sort of came down into the body, and partly because once I started going through treatment, I was experiencing a lot of discomfort in the body and surgeries and pain and um, some pretty caustic and challenging treatments. So that in itself was a huge shift for my practice, that ability to stay with the body and find ease even in the midst of pain. That was a huge, huge teacher.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds like a powerful lesson, and the one that I'm still going through myself, I guess. Yeah, wow, what an experience.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, um, even those I have issues with, and I wouldn't change it, not one part of it. And I have still a lot of repercussions from it. I have uh, issues with my lungs, I have lymphedema, I have immune issues, but I have just grown so much out of that experience. And every point, every diagnosis, every treatment, every challenge has been part of why I feel like I have what I have now. The level of understanding and wisdom and joy really that I have now is because of that, not in spite of it.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, there seems to be this common thread among a lot of the conversations that I have, that these difficult experiences, you know, uh, people come out the other end saying or feeling similar things to what you just expressed, and in a way, I mean, I feel like the same thing might be happening on a collective level as well, and that's just kind
Yeah.
of like this feeling I'm getting. With the struggle of everything at the moment.
Yeah, I think Arundhati Roy, she was talking about the Indian writer and thinker. She was talking about this moment being a portal when she was talking about the pandemic. And I really feel like these challenges are portals if we're willing to open the door and walk through, they can really serve as passages into new ways of being, which we definitely need. You know, there's if we're all trying to wake up and lessen suffering for all beings, we sort of need to pass through difficult moments so we can get to something that is better for all of us.
Do you talk about much of that within the book?
It's funny because I wrote this book over the past year and a half. I finished really writing it at the beginning of the year,
Mm.
but I received the last pass, sort of the last edits, right around the time of George Floyd's murder, and I was able to add in a few things about COVID, like in the second pass, which had come to me maybe a month earlier. So there, I have some mentions about this time period in the book, but the book is just kind of naturally dealing with those issues in a way, because it's talking about belonging and the paradox of the fact that we belong to each other. You know, that's just, you can hear sirens in the background because I'm in Brooklyn. um, that it's just the truth. Like ancient wisdom, all spiritual traditions tell us this, that we're not separate from each other. I'll just let that pass.
It's the kind of peak point, yeah.
Yeah. um, Goodness. NYPD.
So how
Wait.
could you explain this maybe in a little bit more detail, and kind of, yeah, share your thoughts on the whole idea? And it
Yeah.
sounds like a big
So
question, but
it is, but it's the central question. So it's kind of the central paradox of the book that we are interconnected. We're not separate. You know, science tells us this, physics shows us this, that idea that we can kind of separate pieces and parts out is actually false, that we're all probably just vibrating energy in different forms. So um, whether you're looking at like Buddhist teachings or indigenous wisdom or scientific theory, there is that truth that we're not separate, that we're fundamentally interconnected. So that's one truth. But the other truth is that we are separate beings. You're in Melbourne, I'm in Brooklyn. You know, we have different realities and experiences. And the thing is that they're both true. And this is a doctrine in Mahayana Buddhism. It's called the doctrine of the two truths. And the thing about them is that they're both true. So I find that often we lean into one or the other depending on our orientation and comfort. And some people lean into the truth of interconnection and sort of long for that harmony, and don't want to deal with the truth of our difference and separation and injustice and oppression. So they fall into the, oh, we're all one, and I don't see race, and why can't we all just get along, and we're interconnected, and that's the truth of our being. Well, that is true. And then we can also get caught in the truth of our disconnection because of cultural realities and oppression, and we can sort of get swept up in our rage and get caught in sort of the power of righteousness, and we can get entangled in the complexity. So I find that finding that balance where we're paying attention to the suffering and pain and trying to right the wrongs of injustice and difference, um, and then also not giving up the fact that we are interconnected. So it's like how which way do we lean when when are we running away from one towards another, and how do we keep that truth, both truths, in mind all the time? And that's the heart of a spiritual practice, especially in community.
yeah, there seems to be a lot of this. I don't want to say balancing. It doesn't, for me. It doesn't. I don't know if that's the right word, but it seems like this kind of, I don't know, push and pull seems wrong as well. This kind of interplay, this kind of this flowing through things, through the experience in different ways, comes about in a lot of different areas. Like one that you just mentioned, and there's also this idea of kind of, you know, and it might be similar in a lot of ways and probably the same in a lot of ways, but kind of like engaging with our experience and then kind of accepting or allowing what's taking place. And that's also this kind of a balancing act, or this kind of an interplay. And there seems to be a lot of these. Like, what's with all the interplays? Like, you know what I mean?
I think you know, I love balancing in some um, ways, and like a metaphor, it just shows us kind of that if it if it is flowing properly.
Mm.
But I love this term interplay. I've never used it in that way, and that's a beautiful way to describe it too. And I also love that you described it as flow, because I think there's something to flow that really speaks to the ease that we're aspiring to and how we relate to it, because balancing can be really jerky too. And I think that especially when we're first encountering these polarities, whatever they might be, it does feel jerky, you know. And then we start to find kind of more flow. And I see that in my practice. Like there's that interplay and flow of, okay, I have to bring my attention back, but I also want to allow some ease in how I do that. In the beginning, we're sort of like, oh God, I got caught up in thought again, and bring our attention back in this kind of harsh way to our breath. And, you know, as we grow and develop, it's like when we're learning to ride a bike, you know, first we just like fall over to one side and then we fall over to the other. But even experienced bike riders are making micro adjustments. It's always balancing. It's not that they become balanced completely. And so, yeah, there's this grace to how we experience these different aspects as we kind of become more accustomed to them. And I think that's true in relationship with other people as much as it is in relationship to how we experience these things within us.
Mm. For sure. Yeah, for sure. I've got this thing on my mind, and it's kind of pulling me in that direction. I want to hear a bit more about the specifics of your practice and maybe what you teach.
Mm. Yeah, you know, these days I'm teaching a lot of lying down practice, because I'm on a mission to get people to lie down during meditation, especially the kinds of modern folks who show up to most, you know, teachings these days, because we often show up, even if it's subtle or if it's unconscious, with this agenda, this like goal of self-improvement. There's some kind of like still punitive attitude we take towards ourselves, like we're bad and that we need to be better.
Mm.
Um, and so we come basically with a lot of tension, you know, in that. And to me, that's like what not belonging shows up as, is like some kind of tension of feeling like we're not quite right and we have to change and we have to get more of this or less of that, or, you know, we don't have enough, whatever the enough is. We're not successful enough or rich enough or smart enough or, you know, woke enough or pretty enough. You know, we can like be endless and are not enoughs. So that ease of lying down is really powerful. I do lying down meditation every day, and there's like new and amazing levels of release that I can find. That there are all these ways that I hold tension in my body that I'm still discovering, you know, that, you know, even like just deep in my solar plexus, there might be a holding that I never uncovered, because I think that really helps to balance the doing that we're so caught up in. Or I'll say I am, and I witness this around me, that we're hardly ever not doing now. And I consider doing also, you know, scrolling, and taking in information and all of the activity that we put our brains and our hearts and our bodies through constantly. So my practice is really about teaching people and continuing myself to develop that ease, to help balance all of the doing. And then the other part of my practice that's been growing and growing for me is this real coming into connection with what um, I can only describe as nature, and that I'm not separate from that. Um, that there's somehow this sense of self and the kind of uh, unhelpful ego is is really when I separate myself from the sense of nature. So really using the practice to connect to just the naturalness of my body. So I use the elements practice a lot, which is also another classical practice in the mindfulness teachings that doesn't get taught very much, where you just connect to the earth element, the fire element, the water element, the air element within, and there's a natural um, understanding that arises that that's not separate from everything around us. And I'm just really fascinated too that the elements are in indigenous teachings in every culture, every continent. All the ancient systems of health and well-being and spirituality include the elements. So just wanting to tap into that really ancient knowing.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. You've mentioned, well, yeah, it is very interesting that it's within all the cultures, and when you look at these traditions that have thousands of years behind them, and then you see similarities between them, there must be a reason for that. And they feel, and especially when you can connect that to your own sense of kind of feeling into things, and your own sense of, oh wow, now this takes me a little bit deeper into my feeling of belonging. And 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 yeah, it's an interesting. Have you found any other kind of patterns within these kind of ancient traditions or ancient people?
I can't say that I've done a lot of investigating of this, but it is interesting to me that the breath is a common meditation practice and object, way of connecting in so many traditions. So that's another, more common, much more well-known practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really do like the instruction in the classical mindfulness teachings that we're bringing awareness internally, we're bringing awareness externally, and we're bringing awareness internally and externally. And sometimes I feel that's another thing that's gotten lost in our study of these teachings and our practice, that we're actually invited to kind of see that lack of separation and that connection. um, so you can do that with the breath too. So breath
Mm.
practice for me isn't only about my individual sense of concentration or what the breath can do for my practice, but really experiencing that um, non-separation from all breathing beings and really all of this planet.
Mm. Feel free to say no to this, but I've got I would. I think it'd be really great to do a bit of a short meditation with you to close things off. And if you haven't got time, or if you're not in the mood, that's totally cool, because I understand it's really hot over there where you are. But I think it might be a fun experience.
Yeah, sure. Is there a
Um,
particular meditation?
I guess I'd like to share kind of you leading us through something that's more of your style. And we could even invite people to lay down. I don't know. But it might be fun. But anyways,
Sure. Yeah.
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 Um,
Happy to.
so I wanted to speak to you about retreat, because I've noticed you've mentioned it a few times,
Mm.
and I'm kind of in this stage, or step, I guess. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I'm in this space at the moment where I'm trying to find a way to organize things in my life, to a certain extent, and I've noticed that there's kind of a bit of organizations needed in some areas, and one of those areas is my practice.
Mm. Mhm.
Organizing myself as to kind of what I'll be doing, and obviously allowing for other things to come up, and if it doesn't really work out in certain times and whatever else. But I'm trying to incorporate more retreats, and even define what they are to me, and what type of retreats that may really uh, I could maybe really act as some kind of a stepping stone to my practice, once in a while, to kind of push myself, and take me a bit deeper into things, before coming back to daily life. Could you talk to me about your experience with retreat, and just this idea of kind of organizing a practice?
Yeah, sometimes we can fetishize retreats and think that, that's where we're going to figure things out. And what I found in my life and what I've seen with, friends and people around me and also my teachers is that retreat really complements our daily practice and our daily life. So it helps give us time to reflect, to deepen, but then we really have to do the work of bringing that back into our life. And for me, a lot of the transformation then happens in my life, not necessarily on retreat. Um, but having said that, I would encourage for those who can make time, and it's harder depending on our life, our work schedules. Obviously, right now, retreat centers are mostly closed, so no one's doing retreat in that way. um, it can also, if we live in urban environments, really give us access to nature in a way that, for me, I just didn't have the opportunity without retreat time to really be in nature in that way that gives us that deeper connection because we are able to commune. We're not on a trip with family or moving from one place to another. We're really able to feel the power and majesty and interconnection with nature. So it's really important that way too for those of us who don't have access, even though everything is nature, including us. But wild nature is something different. Um, and then, it's also can be a slippery slope because I've found, and what I see in a lot of people, um, I used to run a Dharma center in New York City, New York Insight Meditation Center, and we used to, the co-director and I, we would sometimes refer to ourselves as like the Black Widows because we would just kill people's like connection to their careers or to sort of normal life. That
Hmm.
once you start practicing and once you start doing retreats, it's hard to stop. There's kind of that dharma bum, dharma dropout phenomenon that you realize the power of deepening practice, and you start to kind of orient your life around that rather than the other way around. um, so be careful what you wish for and what you create, because it can cascade too. uh, and I think that it's amazing even if you do a day-long retreat, and we can create that for ourselves, right? We can do that at home. We can just decide to unplug the Wi-Fi and turn off the phone and practice all day. We can do that in an urban setting. There are a lot of urban centers now that do kind of um, retreats that are non-residential. They sort of have practices all day. You go home and sleep, and then you come back the next day and do them. And there are weekend retreats, so you can start small. And there's a real power in longer retreats. So to do 10 days, 2 weeks, or even more really provides the opportunity to deepen in a way that I think is just not possible, has not been possible unless you were a monastic or had a particular life path. And the fact that more and more people have access to that, I think, is one of the ways that will create portals for more and more people, for more and more change.
Would you seem like you just lightened up after that last sentence? Do you have a specific experience that you can that comes to mind when you talk about, the deepening power of a longer retreat?
Oh, wow. It's funny that I lightened up because a lot of my long retreats have been really hard. They're not pleasant experiences, but pleasant doesn't have to mean suffering, right? Unpleasant doesn't have to mean suffering. Pleasant doesn't have to mean suffering either. But there's a way in which, we learn how to have ease by going through difficulty. That I think retreat gives us the opportunity to really plug into, because there's nothing to distract yourself with. If I'm having a hard time, I can call a friend, I can, you know, complain about someone or complain about something or distract myself with something pleasant, or, um, there's so many ways for us to get away from what's unprocessed or feels undigestible. But on retreat, Of course, you could, hide in your room the whole time and do nothing. But if you've gone there and made that commitment and paid all that money and gone all the way, most of the time, you'll have the support around you also to really stay with it. And we learn by staying with it how much transformation can come from that. And I want to say that's as true. So a lot of retreats are silent and they're individual, but I think that's true of the practice of being in community in general. It's one of the most kind of famous phenomena on retreat is that everybody drives you crazy, even though no one's talking to each other and you're not interacting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are two phenomena that people talk about: the Vipassana romance. So, falling in love with complete strangers, and then at the end of the retreat, you meet them and you realize that they're your worst nightmare.
That's
So you
interesting.
just sort of project onto these people. And then the other is the Vipassana vendetta, someone whose just way of being annoys you. And the more and more retreats you do, the more you realize that it's you, right? It's all about you and your own projections. You start to see that. You start to be able to laugh at them too.
Sounds like there's some pretty interesting links between going on a retreat and life.
Yes, it really is. It shows you, except you don't have all of the distractions or all of the projections and counter projections to help you ignore life, to help you
Mm.
ignore your own mind, your own tendencies. It's all right there for you to see.
But from
You
this
see.
perspective of the lessons that you draw from that experience, it's kind of almost as if it's because you don't have those distractions, some kind of an acceleration is taking place or a facilitation of sorts.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's a great
Mm.
way to put it.
Yeah, I don't really have much experience with retreats, to be honest. I've been running my own little ones, where I go into the forest for a couple of days and just stay at a house and do my own thing. And
And how are they?
they're amazing. I mean, I found a period before them and after them to be very important. So the preparation leading up to the retreat usually kicks me into gear, and I've been trying to. What I've been doing is I've been trying to kind of take note of my natural environment where I am at the moment, and the changing of not only the seasons, but and just going to the seasons for a moment in the Aboriginal kind of calendar. There's many more seasons than just the four traditional ones. You've got when certain flowers start coming out. You've got when the last leaf falls, and this kind of an idea. So I'm trying to kind of match up at the moment my retreats with or my what I'm calling retreats with kind of what's going on in my environment, and then kind of finding a way to pay homage to kind of that what's going on there and linking that to my own experience. And I found the preparation for these to be really powerful because I know it's coming up, so I'm really trying to, do the best I can and give it the respect that it deserves. Because then, not only because of the fear of getting my ass kicked when I'm on the retreat, but also because I feel as though that's, like I said, that's what it deserves. And then the retreat itself is, like you said, it's this kind of beautiful, challenging mix of elements, and then afterwards there seems to be a real opportunity to integrate the experience, and an opportunity that can be squandered and can be wasted and can be kind of allowed to pass without really making the most out of it, but also one that's available to really kind of step into and use that as a way to strengthen my practice, like you mentioned earlier. So, yeah. But I haven't actually been to like any Vipassana or anything like that. But I'm interested. I'm interested in kind of exploring that and seeing what that world is like. And it's interesting, these correlations you mentioned about people and the way they feel with one another without even speaking to each other. And sometimes, in life that comes up. I know personally that's come up for me a lot of times, and it's just about kind of recognizing that it is me, and it is kind of a projection. Yeah. So
Yeah, and Zen, they have a saying that we're like rough stones rubbing up against each other, and that's how we become polished and smooth. Yeah.
I feel like you're a bit of a. You've mentioned this before, and I've heard you talk about it. You're a bit of a dharma nerd. You
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know a little bit more about these Like, I'm interested in how Buddhism has kind of shifted and changed, depending on geographical area, the time, the culture, how language has changed and kind of developed over time, and that's kind of had an influence on these different traditions. Would you be able to share some I'm asking you the most random questions today. Could you be able to share like an interesting fact or a little bit about that kind of, I don't know if it's an obsession or that interest of yours in kind of studying up on this kind of a thing?
Yeah, I don't really know where the interest itself comes from. I mean, I have a degree in religious studies focused on Buddhism, but I was actually a pretty terrible student, so I don't
Oh,
think that
really?
it's yeah. I mean, I was in undergrad and I was partying a lot, and but obviously something drew me to it. But I guess partly because have been in different traditions and sort of see and notice the difference between the teachings and the communities. But I think the primary kind of interest for me now is to really start to look at the lenses through which these teachings get transmitted, especially here in the West, and why that is. So, there's this sort of assumption that we're getting the pure and clean teachings, but translation by its very nature is biased in some way or another. Even just the words we use, we translated this word sati as mindfulness, and now we think that that is the thing, this word mindfulness, but even that word is very fraught with the connotations we bring to it by putting mind at the front, the attentional aspect being really emphasized over kind of the allowing or awareness aspect of it. The original word has a connotation of remembering. We've kind of lost that as part of that origin of that teaching. So there's so much there, I think, that allows us to see the cultural bias, the bias of the dominant voices who kind of speak these teachings aloud, and also what was left out, what was left behind. So certain people, either Westerners who traveled to Asia or Asians who came to the West, brought their perspectives of these teachings. And so what's happening, in Thailand or in Burma, or how did the teachings change in Burma because of British colonization? Like, there's so many aspects to how these teachings move, how they moved from South Asia to Southeast Asia, how they changed in Tibet because they encountered Bon culture and spirituality, how they merged with Taoism and Confucianism in China and became Chan, how that went to Japan and blended with Shintoism and became Zen. So these teachings are already these cultural mixes, and so here we find it meeting neuroscience and Western perspectives and secularism, and then that becomes the true teachings of Buddhism. And so it's just an interesting cultural conversation, I think, too.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel as though it's just again, this flowing between the different traditions. It seems as though there seems to be this common element throughout, or a common thread of sorts, or many common threads that comes through, although there are so many differences as well.
Yes, and that is kind of the core that we could also identify that's connected to a lot of indigenous wisdom too, right? That comes back to that truth of belonging and interconnection and kindness and seeing things clearly, and compassion, and these truths that we find across cultures. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Cool. That was very fascinating. I'm interested to kind of read up a little bit more on the history and just I find it very interesting myself, although I haven't really gone down that path very deeply.
Yeah, there seem to be more and more people kind of exploring that and writing about it, and looking at the ways that Buddhism has been interpreted, rather than thinking that we're getting the facts.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think that's a dangerous thing to kind of think, that we kind of know something, that we're
Anything.
yeah, anything at all. Like We don't know what's going on. No one knows what's going on. So it's like this. It's this, yeah, this trap that I find myself falling into quite often, actually. And it's worth kind of approaching things with an open mind, as open as possible, and I think it's worth personally, like I found it really valuable to just open up to everything as much as possible, anything that comes my way, and for example, people that come into my life, or just come across my path, and I find interesting, or an experience that I normally wouldn't engage in, and ideas and new ideas, and trying to be as open as possible to those. Yeah.
That's a
Anyways,
great attitude to have. I think that is probably the most important kind of attitude, is that curiosity.
yeah,
Actually, I read about this in my book, that my friend, well, many years ago, I was journaling and I realized that creative and reactive are the same word. The
that's
C
interesting. I
moves.
never knew that. Mm.
Yeah. And so my friend asked me, what does the C stand for? Because the C comes to the front in creative.
Ah,
And we were
okay.
talking about it. And we were like, oh, maybe it's like compassion, or maybe it's consciousness. And I decided that it's curiosity.
Mm.
That when we are truly curious, that's how we move out of reactivity into creativity.
Yeah, this sense of curiosity, I think it helps us through a lot of things in life as well. Like, you could be going through a really difficult time, and it may seem kind of ridiculous or unbelievable to find some curiosity within that. But I think
Mm.
that has some power if you're able to get in touch with your own kind of curious nature and say, okay, I've got a lot of pain here, but maybe I should, maybe I can explore this pain. Maybe I can
Mm.
explore why I'm feeling like this, or how this is kind of affecting my life, and just this exploration, or this curiosity, just the fact that you're kind of going through the motions of that. Before you know it, you're kind of you're looking at the whole experience from a different lens.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than this, controlling, forcing, things need to be this way. I need, and I should feel like this, otherwise, something's wrong. Just to contrast that with the curiosity, it can be liberating.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
I love that.
Okay, so I don't really know where to go from here. I feel like we've had a good conversation, and I feel as though people can get something out of it. So that's kind of the main thing. Should we do a bit of a meditation, and then maybe afterwards you could share some details about your book and all that kind of how people can get in touch with you. That regular part of the show.
Great. So we'll do like a 5-minute meditation.
Yeah, and
And
I'll leave it up to you, and we'll just follow along.
great. So for people who are listening along, you can lie down. Highly recommend that, to really allow the body to relax and release. But if you're sitting or standing, just whatever posture you're in, to allow yourself to find some balance between being open and relaxed. So you might want to roll your shoulders up and back and just make sure the front of the body is open, not contracted. You can take a deep breath in and out to allow some relaxation and release to come to the body. You can close your eyes or just gaze softly ahead of you. And just allow your attention, your awareness to come inwards. And begin to rest your awareness on the body, place to begin to gather your attention, connect to sensation. The body can be a really easeful place for us to rest awareness. And sometimes there are things going on in the body that are challenging or difficult, and that's okay too. So finding a place in the body that you can rest can put your attention and find even a little bit of ease. For some of us, that's the breath. So if you'd like to be with the breath, just noticing breathing as a process. Noticing each inhale and each exhale. If the breath is not a comfortable place for you, perhaps resting awareness on the feet or the hands. Just anywhere where you can actually sense your experience. You can actually feel sensation. So feeling each breath coming in and out, noticing what those sensations are like, what each breath is like, if it's long or short, or smooth or rough. Or noticing contact, feeling the feet on the floor or feeling your seat in the chair. And when the mind thinks, which it will do, because that's what minds do, that's not a problem. It's just part of the process. And we can use the breath, the body, any sensations as an anchor to help us come back to this sense of presence and ease. Thoughts and sounds can arise. You can still come back to just this moment of breathing, of feeling. Just knowing in any moment throughout our day, when we remember, we can come back to this presence, this connection with the body, always right here. The body is never in the future or the past. It's never planning or worried. It's simply being. Opening your eyes when you're ready. Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
so
you.
much. Thanks for tuning into this episode with Sebene. You should definitely check out her book, You Belong. It's coming out soon, and depending on when you're listening to this, but I'm going to leave you some links in the description. If you want to find out a little bit more about her work, what she's up to, and her story, then head over to sebeneselassie.com. It's SEBENE BeneSelassie. And yeah, we can go from there. So I might even be gifting away a copy of her book in a coming episode on the show. I'm definitely going to be getting a copy for myself, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. I really do appreciate your presence and you being here with me and coming on this journey with me. If you want to support the show, then all you need to do is contact me and let me know how you feel about it. Give me some feedback. Leave a review. If you're listening to this, I need some more reviews. That would really come in handy. So leave a review, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Get in touch, or just click subscribe if you haven't already. Anything like that would really help. Really, build some momentum in the direction of, wherever this is heading. We'll just have to see. But yeah, thank you again for tuning in, and stay tuned for more, conversations around exploring that state of stillness, some practices that are going to help us reach it, and connecting on a deeper level with ourselves, the beings around us, and the planet as a whole. Because that's what this show's all about, and that's what we're really going to be going deep into in the coming episodes. So catch you next time, I guess. Thank you.